Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I drop my kid off at school and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. A little bit of siren noise in the background for you this morning. It's a hazy, lovely day here in suburban Chicago, high 60s. We're expecting rain later in the day, but right now it's quite lovely. I hope that you had a nice weekend, listener. I did have a great weekend. Yesterday in particular was really pleasant. We played games all day. I had a game of Sagrada, a game of Betrayal Legacy, which I have yet failed to be the winningest of winning players in any particular game, which is kind of a bummer there, but not a huge deal. We played an exit game, The Mysterious Museum, which was fun, not as hard as some of the other ones have been, which is kind of nice, actually. It was sort of fun to actually solve problems occasionally, so that was good. Let's see, what else do we play? We played The Adventurers, the Temple of Horus, which my son really enjoys. It's a pretty easy push your luck game in the 45-minute range. My son actually won, being the only one who didn't push his luck, and the odds went badly for us and we all got smushed. Or trapped in the cave, and he won as the only person who got out of the temple. We played Tiny Towns. That was the other one I wanted to share. Tiny Towns is a pretty light game I've mentioned before, so I won't dive into it too much more. If you get a chance to play that, it's a good one. And then finally, the last two games I played are going to be the subject of my conversation today, along with one other game I had. Today's episode, Triple Shot, mean card games. So for those of you who have been listening a while, you'll know that generally, all things being equal, I prefer to play games that are nicer in terms of players being nice to one another or players not directly attacking one another. I prefer that aspect of Euro games. Worker placement, the conflict there is fine for me, but games with higher level of conflict, I really have to be in the right frame of mind. I'm discovering more and more about myself. It's not that I don't enjoy those games. I, in fact, do enjoy them. I just need to make sure I'm in the right frame of mind and make sure that we're all kind of on the same page, that this is a game where we're going to be mean to each other, and let's make sure we're all okay with that before we start. Because what I don't enjoy is when somebody gets all bent out of shape, including myself, about the way they were treated in the game. With that said, I played 3 mean card games over the last week, and I would like to take a few minutes to talk about each one. If you haven't heard these before, I have a regular segment I call Shooting from the Hip, where I am giving a brief reaction to a game that I've played recently. Generally, I've only played it once. I try not to have it be a review so much as a idea where I'm commenting on the highlights of the game, what does or doesn't work for me, whether it was fun on the one play. The biggest issue is usually on a Shooting from the Hip episode, I have 1 or 2 plays under my belt at the most, and so I have to offer that as a caveat. I have no idea how any of this commentary stands up in the long run because I have only played the game once or twice. So that said, I have 3 games to talk about here, and I think I will talk about them in the order of reverse popularity or reverse commonality. So the first game I'll talk about will be the one you're least likely to encounter anywhere, and then it'll go up from there. The first game I want to mention today is a game from Exist Games in Japan. It's called Blood and Fortune. The designer is Charles Ward. It's a small box card game for 3 to 6 players, and the premise is a fairly standard. The king is dying and wants to know which of his children or possible heirs should inherit the throne. So he has a 3-day tournament or 3-day process by which the heirs will figure out who will inherit the throne through a system of influence. So the game works is that each of you has a few influence cards, a bunch that are of denomination 1 and a couple that are denomination 2. On your turn, you're going to give 2 of them to an opponent who picks one and puts it in front of them face down in a tableau, and then you get the other one back. There are also these roll cards that allow for the game to be manipulated, sort of like the roll cards in Citadels, where at the end of the round, all of them are gonna trigger. And at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of the round, you get 2. You pick one to make publicly available and the other to discard. The publicly available one gets taken by someone else. So the 2 you get dealt, you'll never have. But you get to pick from one of the 3 that the other people put out. And the idea is that you are trying to manipulate the board so that you end up with the rolls you want, you don't end up with the rolls you don't want, and then you try to get as much of your influence in front of other people as you can while collecting other people's influence in front of yourself. So the way the scoring works, you get these cards out, and some are in front of you and some are in front of them, and you score the ones in front of you plus all of yours that are in front of other people, and they score the ones in front of them plus all of theirs that are in front of you. So the trick is to get yours out and pull some in, but to minimize the ones that other people have out there. There's also a thing where the number 2 denomination card is a push your luck element, because if yours is the last one received by the player, then that one is the only one that will trigger, that the other ones don't. It's not an intuitive game. That I think that I explained it decently, but we had a lot of trouble grokking how it was going to work. Even I, having read the rules thoroughly and be kind of understanding how the game should work, it took a round before I really got the way that it would work. And so our first game was kind of a wash in terms of understanding it, but there definitely are some interesting dynamics there where you're trying to figure out how to give other people cards and get cards yourself. I felt like there were still too many cards in play, so I'm not 100% sure if I did the setup right. I'm going to need to review that more carefully, because in a 4-player game, you still have the same number of cards at the beginning of the round that you would have in a 6-player game, and that seems off to me. That said, I thought it was interesting and definitely worth trying again, although my wife did not like it, so I'm not sure what the likelihood that'll come out again will be. It might be a game that I'll throw in my bag to bring to Toggle a few times for a kind of late in the evening game to give a try to. We'll see. That was Blood and Fortune from Exist Games. Second game I want to talk about is more popular. It's more widely known. It just got a reprint, I think, from Osprey Games, although I would have to check. This is High Society. I was introduced to this game, my friend Chris, regular listener here and regular at the Toggle Gaming Night that I frequent. High Society is a card game from Reiner Knizia, built around auctions, and it's got a pretty simple premise. Basically, your goal is, at the end of the game, to have the most valuable stuff and not have the least amount of money left. So everybody gets the same amount of money, and when you bid, you're bidding with cards that you can't make change with. So there's an interesting element where you want to think about how you use your small denomination. And there's a bunch of items that you pay to buy, and then there's like 4 cards that you pay to get influence on, or you pay to not have them influence you. There's a couple doubling cards, 1 helving card, and 1 gaff, I think it's called, or a social, I think it's a social gaff, where you lose one of your cards, one of your other cards that you have purchased. And so the goal is to buy the expensive things, buy the doubling cards, pay not to have the bad cards. But then at the end of the game, the first thing we do before we score is you look at who has the least money left. Whichever player has the least money left, they're out. They lose. And then the winner is determined between the other players as to who bought the best stuff. So it's a great dynamic in terms of trying to not spend too much so that you don't end up losing for having spent too much. And it makes all the auctions really tense. I played 2 rounds of it, 3-player. Really fun and interesting game. Definitely one that would certainly bear repeating, and has that social element to it in that you're really, as Chris described it, you're playing the players, not the table. That it's more about trying to read what other people are using and goad them into bidding more than they should, that sort of thing. So, like many auction games, it's as much about reading the area as it is about what you have. So that's High Society from Reiner Knizia. The new reprint is lovely as well. The art is Vincent Dutrait, and it looks it. So The third game I want to talk about is also a reprint. This is extremely popular a couple years ago. It was getting all the buzz. A buddy of mine picked up the reprint and we got to play Arboretum. Arboretum is a game I've long stayed away from because invariably the first word out of the description when people describe it is mean. And it is an interesting puzzle. Basically, you're trying to make these, you're playing tree cards with numbers on them, and you're trying to make these lines of tree cards of the same species. And there's some more complicated stuff to it, but basically you're trying to set up this tableau where at the end of the game you'll get to score some of these trees. But the tricky part is you have to hold some cards in your hand because you only get to score the trees for which you have the highest values in your hand. And the highest value card, the 8, is invalidated if someone else has the 1. So if you have an 8 and someone else has a 1, they actually get to score those trees, not you. So there's a really interesting back and forth of elements, and of course you can't move your trees and you have to have them in numerical order when you play them. So there's a lot of different stuff to think about. Really interesting, tight game. Definitely does fit the mean aspect though, because you spend the whole game watching what other people are doing and thinking about how can I keep them from scoring that tree that they're trying to score. But you only get to hold 7 cards, so you have a limited range of things that you can do as opposed to what they can't do. So really interesting mechanisms. Definitely worth a play if you get a chance. That's Arboretum. And I would say in terms of enjoyment, that's my order as well. Arboretum is the most enjoyable. High Society is a very close second though, and I think High Society is probably more accessible for people who don't play games a lot. You could teach it quickly, and it plays more quickly than Arboretum. And then Blood and Fortune was interesting, but difficult to explain, I think. The mechanisms just feel a little odd. But overall, delightful. So there's my, there you go, Thomas. Regular listener Thomas commented that Americans seem to use the word delightful a lot, and so I've been hyper aware of that. And there it was for the day. So that's my mean card game triple shot. I hope that you found that useful as an initial observation. If you have played any of these and would like to comment, I'd welcome those comments over on Board Game Geek Guild 3269, which is our pick up and deliver guild, where you could go there to share your thoughts or just let us know what you played over the weekend or what you've been playing or what you've got playing coming up. I'll probably have one more episode before the end of the month wrap up. We'll see what that is. In the meantime, I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.